I'm in beautiful Anchorage, Alaska, laying on a frozen lake bed. It's about 10 degrees outside. The reason I'm on my stomach is because this is the way that I like to view the landscape, from a bug's eye point of view. I've done this since I was a child. The foreground right up in my face, I can feel it, I can taste it, and then a very rapid jump to the distant background with nothing in between. And that's the way that I structure the landscape image in my paintings. I provide the close-up and the far away. The viewer provides the in-between. I'm hoping to see the aurora borealis tonight. We'll see if that happens. I'm going to stand up now because I can't feel my private parts. One of the questions I'm most frequently asked, and I'm sure you hear this as well, is does one have to be born an artist or can an artist be made? And the honest answer, I believe, is both. Yes, you have to be born an artist, but that plus $2 will buy you a Starbucks coffee. All the talent in the world is meaningless unless you possess an atomic work ethic. An artist is someone who is willing to work harder at stuff that no one else cares about than anyone else in the room. A painter is someone who spends an hour and a half mixing the color pink to get just the right tone, or will sit at a table with a pencil and draw a bell pepper until their fingers bleed. I know because I've done it, and I suspect if you're watching, you have as well. So while other people were out learning finance or medical degrees or how to manage a restaurant, I was in my studio learning how to draw and mix color and bend the three-dimensional world to fit on a two-dimensional surface. So I think the key question to ask at the very outset is, what exactly are you trying to do? State your intention. Are you trying to make art, or are you trying to manufacture a state of lucidity and keep that around for as long as you possibly can? I think telling the world that you're making art automatically dooms you to making someone else's. Making art always implies trying too hard because it offers too much freedom. No, everything is not art. I think the best painting is always born in the most limited perspectives. Myopia is our best friend. I don't want too much freedom. I want to see the world as narrowly as possible. A painting should nail your foot to the floor so that you walk around in circles for your entire life. I try every day to limit my perspectives. I come in here, I do a quick inventory of things that I will never be or do. I will never be a travel agent or a Pakistani. I will never have a solo show in the National Gallery in London or win the Turner Prize. I'm certain of those things so I can move them out of the way to make plenty of room for things that I am certain of. That I'll come in here, lock the door, and try to bend the world as I see it through the prism of my experiences and then squirt that back out into the world as violently as possible. Nail your foot to the floor and then tell us about it. The reason that I work all the time is to try to develop enough technique so that it vanishes. I don't work to acquire technique, but to make it disappear. Because I think when all the trickery, all the chops fall away, we're left with just me and you face-to-face communicating. All of the content is automatically built into the process. So, you know, it's great to be able to paint water droplets on a chicken very realistically. Wow. But that's not going to nail my foot to the floor. It takes a long time. So yes, you have to be born an artist, but I think what often passes for artistic merit is actually just an insensible set of priorities. The next time you hear the word critically acclaimed applied to an artist, just replace that with tragically lonely and colossally lucky. I learned how to flatten and compress visual imagery in my landscape paintings by studying other painters like Tom Thomson, the Canadian who died in 1917, just a few years before the formation of the Group of Seven, whose work I discovered for myself in the 1990s during my Glenn Gould trips. Those painters would often eliminate the middle ground in their landscapes in order to give the viewer the impression of being directly face to face with the wildness of nature, from the foreground directly to the background. That's the way that I construct the landscape in my own paintings. And indeed, after 40 years of painting, I realized that life is not a support system for art, but the other way around. Painting has taught me how to see the world, how to move through the world. And I do so by breaking things down to very simple elements of foreground, middle ground, background. Not only visual things that I see, but also the way that I hear. Right now, I can hear the hiss of my radiator a few feet in front of me. Then out in the street, several hundred feet away, I hear a dump truck. And if I listen very carefully, I can hear a distant siren several blocks away. 3 layers of information, all humming in unison to create a visual or audible sense of truth and of orientation. That's the way that I break the world down. And I've been studying a lot of Roman wall painting lately, noting how those painters would very provocatively bend the laws of nature, the 3-dimensional laws that we all live in, to fit the laws of art, to fit the 2-dimensional flat surface. And the history of painting has been a gradual will to flatness. In my opinion, beginning in earnest in the 18th century with Tiepolo, moving into Cezanne, for instance, who would take little stacks of coins and use them to tip up plates and dishes and still life objects toward the picture plane to make it appear flatter than it actually was. Moving into Cubism, in Matisse's Red Studio, in which we were just marinated in the flatness of red, and even into someone like my fellow South Carolinian Jasper Johns, who would choose subjects that by their very nature were flat. Flags and targets and maps, and then use paint and wax and all sorts of substances to underscore and magnify that very elemental truth of flatness. Painting is a destructive act. A painter breaks down things, mangles them, and then puts them back together in a way that's more intense, more magnified than before, to force the viewer to see things their way for a few minutes. So even though a painter has to have a smile on their face, they also have to keep one foot on the viewer's throat at all times. Whenever you see a painter do this, you're witnessing a violent, destructive act, because this catapults that painter from the 3-dimensional world that we live in into the laws of 2-dimensional. It flattens out the world so they can see it as it looks in flat planes. You're witnessing the violent overthrow of a government, a bull shark attack, a Category 5 hurricane, all of those things bundled into one destructive act. And I do this all the time. One of the most important parts of any studio is over our heads, the lighting that we choose. I use these aluminum clip-on cans with 100-watt flood bulbs, very similar to the ones you would see in any art gallery. I like a consistent light from the time that I paint to the time that the painting is exhibited. And I have very large loft windows with tons of north-facing light pouring in, which I try to block out when I can. I don't like a lot of natural changing light. This is looking over in the direction toward the Empire State Building, that way. And over here, soft lamplight, which reminds me of my parents' house. And I have a nice Aeron chair there. It's important for comfort when you're writing. And on this side, a little recreation of my studio apartment in Jackson Heights, Queens in the early 90s, where I lived and worked in a 200 square foot room for 4 years, existing solely on peanut butter Captain Crunch. That was my chair and my lamp. And on this side, pretty much the same thing. The other side of the studio is where I do large paintings. You can see the lights there. Same thing on that side. And I'm trying to combat all of that peanut butter Captain Crunch by now making these healthy shakes in my studio. I have a fruit blender, and my favorite is blackberries, blueberries, a little bit of almond milk, some ice, some chia seeds, and some almonds. The way that I construct the image of landscape in my paintings is akin to dumping a pack of playing cards out on a table. I spend all day in here stacking skins of color, one on top of another. And I use a bevy of tools to do so, from very large, wide, pliable brushes to pieces of cardboard, pieces of sheet aluminum, palette knives. Very rarely. I use much larger tools than that. I even have an old glass fish tank here, which I use to drag across the surface whenever that size is required. Whatever it takes to get the mark, I will use. And I spend a very long time stacking each skin, each one representing a different period in time, so that in the end, you have many, many moments in time over several months, all stacked together like deli meat on a sandwich, all humming in unison. So that in a way, a painting in its final state is made up of slowness, but it's also accelerated. So it's almost like if you were to film a slug on your back porch and then watch it sped up at high speed. You're watching a very accelerated version of something very slow. My paintings are kind of like slugs.